Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast 2020. It's a podcast where we, having discussed all the problems with the right, and it's just so glaringly obvious that it's just not even worth talking about anymore, is it really? Let's kind of have a look inwards and look at the left a little bit and just figure out what the hell is wrong with everyone. My name's Michael Forrest.
And I'm Ivanka Magic.
And I kind of described the topic of the episode there when it was supposed to be about what the podcast was about, so botched that.
Oh, that's all right, though. We're going
clank.
Click.
All right, listen. Today we're going to talk about... yesterday, when, as of recording, ContraPoints released a video called Cancelling, all going into great depth on cancel culture. The way that sort of left Twitter will take people down for transgressions, and maybe that isn't always fair. So I'm sort of like fresh off that video. I would have liked to have had another watch of it, but like it definitely plays into a lot of the problems that the left are having, don't you think?
I do. No, well, I didn't know this until I'd never heard the term cancel culture until you said it earlier. So, so I was like, oh, I have thoughts on this. I didn't know it had a label. It's nice to have a label sometimes. So I'm quite keen to dig in.
Yeah. So where we might think about like splintering, I think we were talking about last time a bit more. This is more like destroying people that make a mistake kind of thing.
Yeah. Or even people that don't know yet.
Yeah, just haven't learned something yet about something. Frankly, a lot of this stuff is confusing and complicated, and it's very easy to make a mistake. And it's that whole thing of, Anyway, so let's. That's what it's going to be about.
Cool.
So, music. How's it going?
Well, anyone who's listened to this podcast for a little while will know the ongoing saga of me trying to sort out my Croatian paperwork.
This still not complete?
No. Finally, whilst I was in England, I got notification through that my name has been corrected. I now have the same name, exactly the same name with the same spelling and everything on my Croatian papers and my British papers. When I say papers, though, I don't have a Croatian passport yet, and I don't have an identity card and those things. So yesterday, in a very positive, let's seize this new year documentation saga by the ears, or whatever you seize them by, I dutifully presented myself at the local register office and the police station in order to put in all my applications. I went upstairs, I knocked on the registrar's door. Good morning, Happy New Year. I'd like to take out a copy of my citizenship paper, please. Would you mind coming back maybe next week, because we haven't got this year's stamp yet? So in order to issue me with a document, obviously this being the kind of country that likes a rubber stamp, the correct stamp needs to be applied. And the correct stamp isn't available on Ireland yet. So she thought perhaps it would be in today. It wasn't that it wasn't available. It was that no one had gone to collect it. So
did you think of offering to collect it?
I came downstairs to Nick, who's waiting. I was like, this is the stamp. You're not going to believe this. And then he did offer. He said, should we just offer to go and pick it up for them? I was like, nah, let's not get involved. So,
are you sure you didn't say, wouldn't you have said, you are going to believe this?
Yeah, that's true. Guess what now? So yeah, that's what we are. That's where we're at with that. So Tuesday will be the day, because Monday's a bank holiday here. It's the Three Kings bank holiday. Lucky.
Nice. Imagine having some time off. Is it sort of, it's more bureaucratic is there corruption in there as well, or is it just like it's a bit slow and bureaucratic? And
What, in my paperwork sorting out, or in general, or what?
yes, in you. Are you corrupt? No, like I'm just reading The Dark Heart of Italy, which is all about like the Italians' history of just like a political system so corrupt that people just sort of have to live in this slightly lawless way because you just can't rely on the system to, like, everything just takes a year to do, and it's ludicrous.
It is a this country is definitely one that operates best if you know somebody. Well, the corruption is. In fact, one of my New Year's resolutions is to engage more with Croatian politics, seeing as I'm spending more time here now. But absolutely, without a doubt, the corruption is rife. Okay. My bureaucracy thing is not to do with corruption per se. It's just bureaucratic. Things take the time they take. I think there's some weird. There's also this. Respect of power and authority that is odd and somehow incongruous. So a civil servant is in an enormous position of power, especially somebody like me who's a Croat born abroad. I have to, go to a special office that is for, and they consider me not a British Croat. They consider me a Herzegovinian Croat, which is not a good thing to be. God. If you're from Croats are incredibly good at hating each other as well as everybody else.
Well,
so yes,
I did watch that Klaus film, and it was another one of those, like, the closer you are, the more you kind of like have these feuds. It's that thing. It's like this. It's this slightly, I don't know what to even call it. It's like it's just down to the level of a family feud.
Yeah,
it's just human behaviour, isn't it? We just sort of like
it is.
Whoever's closest to us are the ones that we get angry with. Like, I get angry with Adobe because I had to use their software for so long. Like, no one would hate them as much as I do because they have never had to deal with them so deeply. But but it does sound like Italy is sort of a similar. Like, you've got to. I'm reading about like all this flowery, respectful, bowing language you've got to use whenever you ask for anything of the government. Like,
oh my God, the letters that I have to write. Luckily, one of my friends she's a court clerk. She works with the judge. So I write these letters and then she flounces them up for me. Literally, it said, I beg you most humbly to please. I was like, oh, Jesus, I just want you to change my name, please.
Human beings, eh?
Oh, I did get my little, my Twitter thread about Britain being a civilised country flares up from time to time. It's just flared up again, and somebody responded yesterday, which I don't really acknowledge the discussions they're having, but he said civilization is a veneer, we're just monkeys with tribal affiliations. I was like,
Do you think if Twitter, if you had to write in that style on Twitter, there would be a lot fewer problems in the world? If you had to write really flowery.
The phone call that I had to do when I was like, you clearly, because you can't say to them, you've not read my letter properly, you haven't changed my name properly, you've made a mistake. You can't say you've made a mistake. I had to go, I'm terribly sorry. It appears that I was advised incorrectly and that I miswrote my letter. What do I need to write to ask you to check? And this guy was so patronising. I wanted to reach down the phone. He was, but anyway, I didn't think, anyway. But so yes, anyway, so it's there is a level of bureaucracy for sure, and the people here in this particular registrar's office, it's not corruption, it's just an island and it's slow and stuff happens at its own pace, but some things happen really quick, so but the worst is going to the doctors here. You have to know you have to know somebody, otherwise they will not speak to you as if you're a human. It's shocking. But that's a different topic. Well, how are you, Michael?
Sounds excruciating. It's like, every time I think, like, oh, maybe we'll go to Italy. Maybe I was thinking, so here's how I am. I was like, okay, Tories are in. I'm sick of this completely value-free society that I live in. I am learning Chinese, and we're going to move to China or something where I'm going to just get a really good social credit score and just live in China or something like that. And then I've sort of had the same thought about Italy, but then like I'm reading this Italy book and it's like, bureaucracy does my nut. And like not being able to do anything with it, I'm just waste hours and days of my life on bureaucracy does my head in. And then like what's put me off China is this, you know, this Muslim population that they've put in a concentration camp, and they're kind of, it's like this is not, you can't do that to people.
No.
You can't use violence and all these things that they're using to just sort of like re-normalize them into sort of Chinese citizens. It's like there's just you can't do that. So now I'm it's like I can't. It's like put me off learning Chinese as well. Like I'm just like I can't even think about a state that would behave like that. So then I watched there's a stand-up comedian on Netflix that we watched, Ronnie Chieng, which was a very funny stand-up thing. But he was talking about, like, you should just elect Asian people into power here in America because we don't give a shit. We'll just go down the list and get stuff to work. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. Like, someone from China should come in, have to, like, water down the, whatever you call it, or authoritarianism, but still have that same attitude that stuff should work right and that not dealing with, like, just ignore the bullshit, just get on with it and go down this. So, like, I'm like, okay, well, maybe people from that place coming here are the solution. So, and in that sense, like, Andrew Yang is definitely my pick for US president next time.
Though maybe you need to hold this point for when we discuss Dom Cummings next week, because I think that's kind of what he's doing, potentially.
Right. Well, okay, we'll find out. Anyway, Andrew Yang, MA, he's got hats with math written on them, which is Make America Think Harder.
Wow. I like him. Hat. My dad would like him.
Blue hat with math written on it. Ballsy, like... But yeah, he's got a very sort of growing... Did you hear about the Bernie Sanders campaign about if they'd had like a couple more weeks, they would have easily taken it? Like the momentum was exponential when they just decided to start giving volunteers responsibility because they had nothing. They just started going, well, maybe they could organise a thing. Ooh. But they were sort of, they just kind of gave volunteers more and more power, and they just absolutely exploded and turned into this juggernaut.
That's why the effing Labour Party won't do.
Let's talk about cancel culture.
Let's talk about cancel culture. So, Michael, can we have a definition of cancel culture, please, at the kickoff?
Well, cancel culture it's traditionally been a tool of social media to sort of take down bad people in power, right? Like that's the kind of sort of vigilante justice of it. It's like hashtag Me Too. Basically, like, okay, we're going to call out Weinstein. We're going to call out this person, that person. So it's basically vilifying and publicly shaming someone. And John Ronson, you know, it does tie into John Ronson's stuff about public shaming and how Twitter is so effective at like destroying people once people get onto this bandwagon. But ContraPoints sort of laid it out in her last video into sort of like 7 kind of tropes of it, which I've tried to skim through the video quickly and find, but have failed to find them. But like, well, what it is like traditionally it's someone's behaved in a position of power, has behaved badly, and they're being kind of called out for it at last by social media. But what it also is an influencer or like a young person that's sort of like popular on Twitter or YouTube, whatever, kind of like says something awkwardly. Like sort of like one example that ContraPoints gives is of this gay YouTuber, I think it's a YouTuber, kind of like accidentally implying that maybe he's not sure if he's gay, if he's had sex with a trans man, and then like, but it's sort of born of ignorance and being young and not quite realising that there was something there that he had to sort of like, you know, learn about.
Yeah.
So it's used, I guess, like in these communities against each other, and that's where it becomes very poisonous and dangerous and like devastating to people. So someone can get called out for something, and then sort of going to the tropes, there's like this presumption of guilt for whatever reason. So it's not like a court of law type thing, which comes from like believing the victims, like not kind of ignoring, which is a good thing to come from because we've got this kind of legacy of like just not believing women who say they've been sexually assaulted. So Twitter sort of turns that round and says, okay, well, we're going to sort of presume guilt now on people that we're calling out. But then when that's used against the wrong people, you know, it's like, how are they ever supposed to come back from that? Yeah, and then in this example, the person like gave a very detailed apology, like saying, and kind of showed that he'd learned, not just apologised, but also learnt a lot, like, as a result of this, and is now going to be more careful forever. And like he's sort of trans men are men. Like this is okay. I'm sorry for sort of, you know, implying anything otherwise. So, but these are things they're not. It's like you don't, if you're not deep in that world, you're going to be clumsy. But then, but there's this thing of like it sort of happens to people that arguably are a different sort of person with a voice and a platform and in a position of power. But often it's, you know, it's a sort of person on their own kind of making videos on YouTube. And it's, if they're getting most of their community from their online connections, then it can absolutely destroy them if that suddenly turns and everyone's attacking them. So that's cancel culture in my smallest nutshell. I can do it before you speak.
I think there's I really didn't know that it had a name. But I think it's quite an interesting thing because it assumes that you're never allowed to be ignorant in some way, or that because there is a massive difference between willful ignorance or deliberately using language in order to upset somebody, and then and just accidentally or using the wrong terms through lack of experience. And I think being attacked for it just makes people afraid to have conversations as well. Like the risk is quite high. I mean, I like to always, with one of my favourite ways of, you know, thought exercises is if you is taking that behaviour offline and coming up with an offline analogy, and it just doesn't. What it'd be back to stoning and feathering and tarring and literally, it's such an odd thing that we've taken. Or maybe it's not odd at all if you understand humans, but
it's quite a human thing in some ways, isn't it? Because do you know what? Because we had such a long conversation before the podcast. I can't remember what I said before the podcast and what I actually said on it. But like you said about Louis C.K., like, but here's another problem. You know, so there's this presumption of guilt, and then there's this this kind of vilifying people. So it's not just that they've said something clumsy or said something wrong or said something nasty, is that they are nasty, they are bad people, and they are sexual predators, like whatever it is, like gets kind of turned into its essential thing and then turned into a label for that person. Then everyone behaves as though that's the truth, and that we know that this isn't good. And like, but then I think when you were saying like taking it offline, it's like some things like this can be solved with a half-hour conversation with someone offline. You don't need to shame them on Twitter for not knowing something. But this is like everyone's so trigger happy now.
Is that trigger as in
No.
Some of these words, it's hard to keep up. But it also, but at some point recently, I don't know if I told you on podcast or off podcast, I was talking about Jen Brister's book about the other mother, and the fact that I hadn't realised that I had some assumptions about what it would be like to be one of two mothers instead of one of a mother and a father, that would be in some way different about the parenting experience. But how are you ever going to? Why are we not allowed to learn?
And why can't we be forgiven, like, for a mistake? And this is, like when I grew up in a little bloody village in the Midlands. I didn't understand what gay people, like, what that was. It was just this slur that people would call you, and you were terrified that maybe you were gay or something. And, like, it was just this idea that I didn't know anyone gay, or I didn't know that there was certainly no one coming out in my little village of whatever, a few thousand people, because they would have been destroyed in that place. Over the years, like, I've learned more about it, and, like, I kind of met people, and, like, I've just come to go, okay, great. Like you kind of go from that, but what about reproduction? I'm like, I bloody love my kid to be gay.
One of the ways of communicating with people is to meet them where they are. Like, if you want to teach people about something, or you want to talk about something, you have to... If I would like somebody to understand my point of view, whilst this is not always easy, it is an opener for 10 is usually, I used to think that, or I can see why you would have said that, or I can empathise in some way with your position. I'm going to join you over there, and then I'm going to journey with you over to where I am.
Yeah.
But if I'm just going to stand there and laugh at a person, it's not really going to get us anywhere at all, which is why this is such a bizarre approach from people supposedly progressive, woke, all those words. Yeah. It's like, why is it okay to be ignorant about some things but not about others, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So it's like, we're going to be all sharing, caring and understanding. Or are we? But
I think it's a perfectionism thing. I think it's like, because you're deep in this community, and I guess there's this presumption that because someone else is kind of seems also deep in the same community, that if they say slightly the wrong thing, then that's a deliberate, like, that's evidence of some underlying, we've peeled back the facade and revealed their underlying terrible homophobia or transphobia. And what I keep coming back to, like, the frame of all this is the you can't say anything these days trope, right?
Yeah.
It's like, if we're going to do this to each other within our own communities, then how do you expect to get the respect of people outside that community? How do you expect to get those people to be kind to you and, like, understanding of you if we're going to take down our own, like, so viciously?
Yeah. It is, like, vicious.
And I'm going to put Corbyn in this as well, because I think that some left media has like attacked him for whatever reason, but at the expense of what? Like, he was closer to a lot of the people attacking him, their values, than certainly anyone else. But to just like take down people that have your interests at heart seems profoundly irresponsible,
self-destructive,
and just not nice, is it? It's poisonous.
No. But I also think that there's this, when these sort of so-called progressive people on the left, those sorts of labels, when we or they or I talk about somebody who's been in care and then ended up in prison, there's a lot of understanding, and it's not your fault. This is how this is what your upbringing. This is what your life circumstances, and it's society's fault that you fell through the cracks. But when I have grown up not understanding something about I'm reading this book now about it's essentially about racism, but it's this Don't Touch My Hair book, and it's making me think about things in a way I could never have possibly thought about if I hadn't been reading the book, because I'm fair-skinned, fair-haired, a type blue-eyed person who's just never been reacted to in that way and hasn't got all this history but it's really making me think. But instead of attacking me for not understanding, not that anyone's ever attacked me, but instead of attacking me for not understanding something that I've never been exposed to, somehow you can be blamed for some things in your life. We can be very empathetic about some things we consider you to be not to blame for, and then incredibly judgmental about other things that you're equally not to blame for. What do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Have I expressed that properly? And how is that
selected? It's institutional habits, I suppose. It's like we just have expectations of different kinds of people. Yeah, you sort of hold people to. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's always conscious, right?
I don't think it's conscious. I'm thinking of myself as well. I mean, I've some people that you experience who are very rude, and they're professionals, and people go, oh, but they're just like that. And I sometimes be, well, I can be really judgy in that regard. It's like, well, I don't care if they're like that. They're old enough to learn that that's not okay and that they should do something. So I suppose, there are definitely. I myself have been guilty of judging people that I considered to be sufficiently privileged that they should know better, either through education or position or power or whatever it is. It's like, okay, I understand that they feel like that, but they should have by now learnt and know better than that. But then maybe that's not a good thing.
But I think what I'm thinking about now is I've sort of talked to this guy a few weeks ago, and he was sort of like complaining about women in positions of authority and kind of, it's a matriarchy, and then trying to make me have a quota of women on my night. And I'm like, well, I was like arguing the case for that. And then, he sort of comes in and goes, I suppose you want me to feel guilty for being a man. And I'm sort of arguing very earnestly, like, this isn't about guilt. This is just about, this is about growth. This is about learning. This is about like seeing things beyond your little bubble and kind of going, look, maybe there is something to this, instead of just like shutting down because, you feel like you've got enough of your own problems. If we all sort of like grow a little bit and get past this sort of instant idea that you're being guilted for not knowing something yet. But then when you see this sort of cancel culture stuff, which I have I mentioned, like, I don't want anyone to mistake me as one of these sort of like right people that is sort of weaponizing that cancel culture term. But like when you see the left doing this to each other, like, how is the sort of every man that's not part of that community supposed to have anything but guilt when they're sort of informed that they've said the wrong thing or like misgendered someone or dead named someone, or all of these different things that you can do because you just don't know that that's a thing. Like,
But that's because of the judgment. You know, you have been judged and therefore you're guilty, rather than you have been, I don't know, evaluated and found to be somewhat in need of education in a particular area. It's like
once you're educated, then you can be back in the group. Like that is not what happens in this cancelling. Right? It's like no. Once you're out, you're out, and not only you. Your friends, anyone associated with you, like literally, like you see all these tweets of like, if anyone is still following ContraPoints, then just we're not friends anymore, like that kind of thing.
Really?
And attacking her other sort of influencer types on YouTube that sort of are friends with her, like her colleagues, and expecting them to apologise for being friends with her. And like people are losing money on Patreon because people are kind of withdrawing support from someone just for being associated with someone else who has been like is under attack. So it has real like effect on people in that community.
So do you think ContraPoints is strong enough to, is she going to weather the storm?
It's always worth watching the video. Definitely will be in the description. Like, I mean, this video is very sort of alcohol heavy and long, and at moments you're like, oh, I hope she just doesn't come under attack for like complaining about being cancelled. I hope this isn't what people take away from this, because I'm certainly like, she's really sort of broken it down into these things. But like her sort of like conclusion at the end when she does go into the topic of suicide and things like that, it's like, when she, like 2 years ago, her support network was the trans people she'd found online and the sort of non-binary people she'd found online. And but she realised after she first got cancelled, like 2 years ago for whatever, like that you need a separate support network of friends that aren't those people. And so she was basically saying, like, I've got these people and I'm getting through this because I have these people that aren't online people, because if I was relying on that, I would have just, you know, there would be no hope. But when you are, like, looking for validation out in the world and you find it and then suddenly people are trying to destroy you, that's like, you know, some people that haven't kind of... And this is someone that's transitioned online on the internet in public, so she's sort of like seen everything, every attack, every horrible thing already. So but it's still like, for this one to have such an impact, it just goes to show how like people just start foaming at the mouth, and they think they're punching up and they think that they're doing something good by behaving in this absolutely hateful, aggressive, violent way. Like they just think that they're doing something good by doing that.
Yeah, I think to channel my 4-year-old here, this is just fundamentally not kind.
We have systems that are designed to sort of prevent this sort of thing from happening. And, you know, with Twitter being, you know, social media just being this sort of free-for-all, lawless free-for-all, anonymity, like, as well, like, certainly doesn't help.
But then, you know, we've got, I think what doesn't help is we've got high-profile people who also go on the attack. It's just not nice. It's not my cup of tea.
This thing, like I said, like I've been putting off reading about this particular thing. I've been putting off about reading like about a lot of this stuff, because you see the emotional pain everyone's in, and you see the fear everyone's experiencing, and often it's like triggered by it's disproportionately. And there's another section in this video that like where like me saying something that triggers you, and you know that that's what this conversation is going to be about. I'm not responsible for your pain. I'm sorry.
No.
Like, you can turn this off. Turn this off, please. Like, if it's triggering you, kind of thing. But then when people just sort of won't, then what do you expect? Like, you can't just never say it. Like, if you're talking to thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, how can you can't say something that won't hurt anyone. But meanwhile, like, the sort of cancel tweets are just so aggressive and so mean-spirited and just so, like, sort of like black and white, you are a terrible person. It's pretty hard to take, I think.
Yeah.
But this is what you're saying. Like, it's unkind, and it's like, yeah, we need to be kind to people that have transgressed in a way and help them learn, and we need to be kind to fucking right twats as well. Like, we have to talk about Donald Trump without, like, how do we? I don't want to be. If you're finding that person that you really just do not want to be say a nice thing about. Like, I don't see how we can communicate with anyone in that world if we're just going to kind of throw.
I think we can be kind without being passive. Or what's the word? Like, accepting. Yeah. Like, for example, one of the big things with somebody like Donald Trump. So I'll pause that for 1 second. We've had conversations about prison and punishment and those kind of things. It's like, we have to live in I have to live in a world where I presume that once somebody's paid their debt to society, that they are then back in society rather than continuing to be excluded. Yeah. Otherwise, what's the point? Yeah. The problem with a person like Donald Trump, who is on record as saying that he just grabs women by the pussy, is he's never ever apologised for that. He's never acknowledged that it's wrong. He has never in any way accepted that is not okay. And that is why I can continue to not think highly of him. Yeah. Whereas there are, if you take the example that I came off podcast, and it's probably a terrible example, and caveat, don't hate me. But like that video where Liam Neeson spoke about his, his younger self. I think, he was like, when I was in my 20s, I went out and a member of my family had been raped, and she'd said it was a black person, and I went out to find and beat up a black guy. He didn't say that in a celebratory, chest beaty way. He said it in a way that a person who has grown up since that moment, would say something. And I found it quite odd. I didn't see it as something delivered of, it's looking back on a time when I was ignorant in a way that I am not now ignorant, was how I read it. So in that example, I don't see why to spend the rest of his life labelling him as a racist or a vigilante or any of the words that come from that. Do you know what I mean? Do you see what I mean?
It's like people will take, that's another one of these things that happens, and people will completely decontextualise things people have said. Just take like one sentence that sounds bad on its own, and just that will be the headline, and that's kind of what gets clicks, what gets shares. So it's sort of not surprising that our culture, where everyone's like breathlessly competing for your little 5-second snippets of attention, that's the best way to do it, is to take people completely out of context and attack them for it.
But I think, like, for in general, putting people like Donald Trump, who is an extreme case of ignorance and not growing, if you take somebody else, I'd like to think that I have the capacity to at least give somebody a chance to learn something, or let me explain why I think they're wrong, or even that sentence, or even saying why I think you're wrong, or like, I don't know, why I think differently. might be a more positive use of language.
Well,
Let me explain to you why I think that you are wrong. It's probably not a good opener.
That's the legal system. The defendant gets to state their case, and
that's true.
The prosecution gets to state their case, and then it's weighed up. But on Twitter, it's like, just note that attackers just kind of dominate, and the sort of defender gets sort of like ignored, and the sort of like protests get labelled as disingenuous, or like it's just impossible to really. I'm just thinking about, wasn't it interesting how I think the moral of the story in Klaus seemed to be that mean-spirited move of introducing a punishment to the naughty child, done in the spirit of revenge by our sort of postman protagonist. Yeah. That's kind of what turned the town around, like the threat of consequences to being a bad person. And like Twitter, there is no punishment, like unless it's. They've literally said, haven't they? Like, well, they've said they're not doing political advertising, but let's face it, like those platforms there's no accountability for doing something. There's a good case for most of the sort of cancelling tweets to be taken down, just in terms of just on some sort of assault terms. Right? Yeah. But then, and then they've said like, oh, well, if we kind of enforced a more rigorous sort of standard of like anti-fascist policies, then certain prominent politicians would have to be removed from the platform. We can't have that. But no, we can have that.
Yeah, we can.
And I think like the fact that, I know it's probably terrifying for Twitter, but they've been in a position to take a stand on this.
Shut down some noise. Yeah,
they could have shut down Donald Trump's account. Like, they could have done this.
Yeah.
He just gets to say whatever he wants.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
There's no consequences.
There are no consequences.
Like, people do need a little bit of a structure. They do need a little bit of consequences for their actions. Because, like, all this stuff is... to the person, it's empathy, like for the people that this person supposedly hates, right? They're doing it for good reasons. Everyone wants to feel like a good person, like they're doing things for the right reasons. Like any villain is the hero of their own story kind of thing. Like this is just like people want to feel good. They don't want to feel like a bad person. But if there's no consequences or the rules are a bit fuzzy and you can get away with more and more, then people will get away with more and more.
Yeah.
And you need a lump of coal in your stocking.
Yeah, I think the consequences thing. Apparently, one of the reasons teenagers or kids do mad things is it takes a while for the consequences part of your brain to develop, like the playing out the scenarios, and so therefore going out, taking your mum's car out when you're drunk type things. That's it's not really willful. I've half remembered something my sister was telling me from something she'd been learning. But basically, this kind of playing out the scenarios is a bit of your brain that takes time to develop. So, and one of the things I always reduce things to parenting, which feels patronising, but I think it's useful sometimes. It's like there's this book I've been reading about kind parenting or something like that, obviously, and Nick's like, a bloody book. Anyway, but one of the things is like I can't let my daughter run in the road because the consequences of that action are too extreme. But if she refuses to put a raincoat on a rainy day and then gets wet and doesn't like it, that might be a lesson that I'm willing to let her experience for herself. And so there's this kind of it's like there's acceptable level of risk and acceptable level of badness and discomfort, and I might not do it on the way out for the day, but I might do it on the way back, so I know she's getting to a dry house in a set or whatever. But this kind of the consequences are part of what learning is. How you learn. It's like if I say something bad and I apologise quickly and aim to learn or demonstrate that I've learned something, then why should everyone? There is no reason for me to be attacked for that.
If you show growth, you're not. You should be able to be forgiven, and this is the sort of crux of a lot of this. But I think you can't. If someone's willing to grow, if someone's willing to learn, then like they can't be guilty forever. I'm just thinking I've got two solutions to this. One is can Twitter not impose some sort of AI sanctions? It can be automatic, and so that does just pauses your account for a week if you say something twatty, and maybe it hits Trump every so often, hopefully, but it's not like it's deleted forever. Can there not be anything like that Twitter could do? The other one is, should we make polite Twitter? So just when you tweet, you can just type something normal in, and then it just machine learning embellishes it in flowery language before posting it.
So, yes, I ever so humbly beg your attention, please, if you could see your way clear to read my tweet. Yeah, maybe.
PoliteTwitter.com. All right, thanks for listening. If you like this podcast, we trying to get it a bit shorter. So, maybe give people a chance to catch up. It doesn't really have to be an hour, does it? If you like the podcast, you can go to grandpodcast.com. Make sure you're subscribed. There's an orange button, or you can use the app you're in. Where can people find you, Ivanka?
People can find me at Ivanka on Twitter.
And you can find me at michaelforestmusic.com. There's a Patreon. If you want to be our millionth Patreon supporter, we'll give you a prize. That's at patreon.com/grandpodcast.
And if you could take some time to write us some reviews or ratings, that would be marvellous, because it helps other people find us.
Wouldn't that be splendid?
It would. You can even email us as well. Where can people email us, Michael?
You can email us at hello@grandpodcast.com. Please do. And hopefully you're having a good, happy new year. And this is going to be mid-January, I think. But hope you're enjoying things. I hope things are going okay. And we're going to, see how it goes. But thanks for listening anyway. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, 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 bye.